Hello, this is Arcades, and welcome to another tips and tricks video here on Stormworks Build and Rescue. I thought I'd take a look at using the look X and look Y to build a turret. So, we'll be looking over at the different types of how it works, for the most part, and how it affects different pivots used for making turrets. So, hope you like your watch. I hope you enjoy what you see. If you do, remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Helps out the channel immensely. And yeah, let's get into this. Okay. What we're gonna look at, like I said, we're gonna look at trying to using the look X and looks Y to build a turret to control a turret. Yes, of some sort. Now, as you can see here, I have a velocity pivot set up. I have a robotic pivot set up, and I have the different seats. And what we're going to do is going to take a look at the logic a little bit, how these things read the data, how they use the data, and how these present the data. And we're going to try to get a functioning turret built. So, first of all, let's take a look at these seats. So, as you see, when you look over them, at the top there, they have a look X, look Y output on each of these seats. Such, right? Now, the thing is, what it monitors is how far you're looking when you go to look, sit here and look around. It monitors how far off the center you're looking and gives an output value based on that. It might be a little bit more specific nuance of that, but basically for relative, that's what it's looking at. Now the thing is, it only reads in 180 degrees. Well, it might read farther, but for practical purposes, it's easy just to think of it just going 180 degrees. Now, we also have the robotic and the velocity pivots. Now, I've already got these kind of hooked up to the system. And like I said, they take the values that are presented from these look X, looks Y, and use them on their inputs to create movement. The thing is, however, these things use that input in different ways to create the motion. Let's go into the workshop real quick. So, we're going to take a look at the logic real quick here. So, for example, we have the look X and look Y. It says outputs the character's look direction in turns along the X-axis, and outputs the character's look direction in turns along the Y-axis. So it outputs along 0 to 1 on how far you're looking. Now, what will happen is if you properly apply that to the pivots and such, it will actually translate it to a movement. But in order to properly do that, you have to understand how the pivots work. The pivots take their input value and translate to a motion. The robotic pivots, they look for a target to move the rotation to. So if you send an input to it of 0.75, it's going to rotate to 0.75 along that axis. If you do negative, it will go in the other direction to 0.75, negative 0.75. So it's looking for a target to reach and then stays there. Velocity pivots look for speed. They're seeing how fast you want them to spin. They have a full 360 degree range, whereas the robotics only have 180 degrees from the way they're facing. And the velocities have, like I said, 360 degrees. So what you're looking at is you're adjusting the speed. So the number you input in there, if you give them a positive number, it spins in one direction. If you give it negative, it spins in the other direction. But there is no seeking point. It's not seeking a point. It's just spinning. So the control method with look X and look Y will be different between the robotic pivot and the velocity pivot. Here, you can actually look at a point and it will actually follow you and trace you to that point. Whereas this, you're going to have to readjust your aim to slow it down to bring it into position. So to show you practically, like I said, I got these two set up. So I'll show you what that means, basically. Now, for the robotic pivot, like I said, it's trying to seek. So you aim, it's going to follow your aim. Problem is, as you can see, it's not actually getting onto the point I'm looking at. There's a reason for this, and it can be solved mathematically with a function block. We will go over that in a second. Now we have the velocity pivot. This one takes your movement and makes it more like a directional arrow, and it follows. So the closer to the center you are, the less movement it's going to make. So you have to adjust your aim to take an account for that. But the thing is there's a delay. The longer you take the transfer, the longer it takes to start coming back in the other direction. So as long as you're giving a positive movement upwards, it will continue to move until you come down negative of your look. But the big advantage of the velocities, though, is the fact that it can do a full 360-degree spin, whereas a robotic, at best, can do 180. So I see a lot of people generally like to go with this when they're building turrets on ships and such because of the full 360 degrees. So this is flexibility versus accuracy. Now you're like, well, what about you just saying it was not off-center? Well, how you normally fix that? To bring the robotics up to speed with your look, you just need two function blocks. So you can either put this in a microcontroller, or you can, do it like this. And what you're going to do, we'll go to the select tool, come in here, and you're just going to go X times 4. So it's going to quadruple the output from here, because it's, like I said, it's only doing from 0 to 0.25. Now you're like, well, this is supposed to be reading in that. Well, the thing is, it's expecting a 0-1 input from like a throttle, or from the seat. So there's like some internal automatic adjustment based on the inputs to translate its movement. So you have to readjust your output from the control handle to match that 0 to 1. And since it's only outputting at 0.25 at most, you need to quadruple it to match that 0 to 1 that a throttle or even the seats would then do. So at 0.25 times 4 will give you 1. So thus the X times 4. And in the case here, we're going to copy this. I'm going to copy it 3 more times, because we're going to do this for the velocity pivot as well. So that's going to make a point for the most part. We'll get these merged in. Okay. Now we're going to take the look X, we'll put it into there, then we'll rehook it up to the X robotic pivot and do the same thing with the Y to our vertical robotic pivot. We're also going to do the same here. So this is the X, take that to the X, our horizontal movement, and the Y goes to our vertical movement. I guess I should make this clear because I didn't at the beginning. Your look X is your horizontal looking, left to right, and your Y is your up and down. So keep that in mind. All right, let's go take a look at this. So, as you essentially saw, I basically am controlling the... I am quadrupling the output from the look. Now, when we go to point, we now have something that's a lot more accurate to where I'm aiming. That is more on point with the robotic pivot. Now, with the velocity pivots, it means it reacts a lot faster with the higher value. So keep that in mind. Multiplying it will increase the speed amount with the velocities to make it more reactive. Okay, so when it comes to the velocity pivots, also, even though I have it set up like this here, most people actually like to put the entire pivot, or the handle, on the actual gun's pivot point, or the body that has the gun, to something more like this. As you can see, I replaced it around. These are still the same velocity pivots. We still have the same function blocks, all that. So when you get on it, it gives you a more relative thing, because as it comes to match your position, it slows it down. Especially in third person. Because it's a lot easier to just bring in center when you have it at position. So. Oh, wow. So, however, you get this effect where if you go to third person, you just look like you're getting swung around all the time. So, now, both of these has their disadvantages. One is you have the limited movement of this, because you can only do this, so you can't shoot behind yourself at all. You can see it stops. Can't go past there. So how do we make a more omnidirectional turret that has the 360 degrees of the velocity pivot while having the precision of the robotic pivots? Well, let me show you what I came up with. Okay, here we go. This is my turret setup for a precision 360 degree setup. What it requires is actually a velocity pivot with 2 robotic pivots. So we're taking basically this and setting it on top of a velocity pivot. And with the proper settings, as you can see, I still control. There, you do have to make sure you because it's getting caught on the edge of the turret ring, but that's neither here nor there. That's for particular builds. But when I want to spin around for another spot, I can use my controls, the keyboard, to make me move. Now you're like, well, that's not just pure mouse. No, it's not. But I prefer the precision of the look and the robotics on the mouse. And that way, I can actually just turn the turret to face the direction I need it to face, and then work from there. Now, how we set this up, come in here. Now, this is the seat, so this is basically, it's going to be no different from the handles overall. I have the function blocks on the back that are quadrupling the output. Now, the difference here is I obviously am controlling the ring, this velocity pivot, which is all a turret ring is a velocity pivot. I'm controlling it with the seat via the A and D axis. Now, if you want to get somewhat of a when you use the default seats with their default sensitivity on a velocity pivot, it'll start, it starts at 10%. If you use it at that 10%, what you'll have happen is you'll go forward, we'll get up to speed. You see I'm at max speed. It took a while to get up there. When I let go, as I have now, it takes a while for it to stop. That's not advantageous for us in this scenario. So when you go and bring that up to 100%, what you're saying is you're telling that seat, hey, go to full speed. Go to full speed. Actually, it's not full speed. You're going to a speed of 1. So you're saying, go to this speed right now. As you see, it's like all or none. 0. There is no... I mean, other than just its own reaction to actually coming to a stop, I can just press the tap of the button and you can see. There. So now we have the control, overall control. Now we're just applying that on top of this turret ring. And as you can see with the turret ring, I just planted, this setup inside here. Okay, now for an issue with the hitting, I just used a clamp to adjust, to give this a limited down angle so that it doesn't hit this. I mean, it's still getting issues, but, they're minor and all that. Okay, so to recap, how I actually built this. I showed you its performance, now we're going to show you how to build it. So we're going to take a velocity pivot. Turret rings are basically just velocity pivots. But I'm going to take this medium turret ring here. And we're going to place it down right... We're going to put it right here. Now, here's something to note. For your horizontal, your X-axis stuff for this scenario, you see that it has a negative and a positive arrow showing you rotation. Now, the thing is when you first click on it to put it down, it's actually inverted from what the chairs will be doing. So however you choose to control this, you got to make sure this is rotated the right way. The proper way you want to go with is you want to go with the arrow on the positive arrow on the left. So it will rotate right to the positive. This is how you want to go. So you can just simply hit U and it will flip the arrows. Flip its direction. Mirror it. So in this case, we're using a turret ring, so I'm just going to place this right down right here. Now, due to the nature of the turret ring, I'm going to need to make a base. So we're going to take the part that rotates. I'm going to create a little bridge here. Because you can't put anything actually individually up against the wall of the turret ring. It won't let you. So I'm using the top edge to create the lower place I'm going to insert this pivot into. So we're just going to go ahead and delete those. I'm going to grab a robotic pivot, like I did here. And just like the turret ring, you notice the arrows aren't going right. So we need the arrows to match. So, got that placed in. We have ourselves a turret. Now we have our gun base. So we got our turret base. This is the gun base. And now we also need this pivot. So I'm actually going ahead and we're going to make this a little taller. We're going to grab the robotic pivot, put it on its side. Now, you notice it's not keeping the gun centered. Generally, this doesn't matter too much. It does have influence, but it doesn't matter too much. But if you want it to center the gun along the view out of the rotation, you're going to need to add some extra blocks along the base so that you can move said pivot off to the side. Let's get rid of those. Now, When we're looking up, it's going to be giving a positive. So right now, this arrow is fine because it's going to rotate upwards to match. Now we're going to grab a gun. Since for this demonstration, we're just using this. Whatever you end up using for your turret build, this is a generic build scenario. This isn't like, oh, this only works with this. You can do this with bigger guns and such. However, you need to make sure you take into account the size of your setup and the size of how you're feeding it and all that scenario. You're going to have to take care of it. Because I'm running off of infinite ammo for this example. There are scenarios where you can be running ammunition through here to get up to the gun. I mean, that's not impossible, you know. And you have to make sure you have the room to do whatever you're going to do with this turret. Now, for the seat, the best way to do this is to actually have this, at least one of the ways I like to do this, is to make sure you have the seat attached to the base velocity pivot. So we're going to grab like this control handle here, and we'll put it on there. I'm not replicating this, so I can show you that it can be done with other things. And then we're going to grab our function blocks. And I'm just going to place 2 here. X times 4, copy that, and then Control V, paste that in there. Take our look X, put in the first block, put that out to the bottom robotic pivot. Look Y into our vertical robotic pivot. So now the gun control is the same it is here. And then I'm going to take A and D, and we're going to put it into the turret ring. Then we're going to go to this. First, I'm going to change the trigger to push. Take A and D. We're just going to take the sensitivity up to 100%. And the trigger onto there. Now, obviously, you got to hook up your electricity where important, and then your ammunition where you need to as well. But for mechanically, this should be done. See, and then I can turn it and shoot. Wherever I want. So it's that simple. Now, if you want to expand on it, there is something interesting you could do as well. Now, I'm not going to go into it specifically too much. I will explain what's happening, but it's also a straightforward example overall, but this gives you an example of what you can do to help increase, your accuracy. Now, what I'm going to show you is not a perfect build, but it does work. It's a proof of concept. Okay, so when you start putting the technology together, you can create something like this. So imagine this. You're inside your ship. Here's your weapons room. Here is the turret on the top of your ship that we have built. You got your ammo feeding from here, whatever you're doing. You need to use it. So you get in the seat, and as you can see, we have a functioning system. It's not perfect. This is more of a proof of concept. Keep that in mind. And I know there's other people that actually have this stuff built into theirs, but you can use the screen. Now you're like, hey, you're still pointing forward. Well, yes, I am, but I can use the turret ring to move it around, and you notice I'm still looking the same direction. But you can see the gun is adjusting its output. The robotic pivots are adjusting their output based on where I am looking. because it's just taking the look data. Not where I'm actually looking at, but the look data of how I'm moving. And I can even turn it behind me. And shoot behind me. As you see, that's where I'm sitting. Full 360 degree. So, interesting proof of concept. It does work, and you can create yourself systems like this with the proper use of the X and Y. Okay, Joe, for a quick summary, just went over how the look X and look Y works in BASIC, and where you can find them on the seats. However, I would like to note that I didn't mention it earlier. The helm does not have the output nodes for look X and look Y. Even though the seat does have the data on it, they don't have the output nodes. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but at the time of this video, they are not there. They could be fixed down later. If they are, the data's still there. So, yeah. So we looked at the advantage of using what the velocity pivots are with the look X, look Y, the advantage of looking at the robotics with the X and Y, and then we applied them onto basic turrets, and then tried to make a more universal turret that can be easily used. So, at least in my opinion, easily used, with greater performance, using the advantage of both pivots for these scenarios. So, and then a proof of concept of how you go further. So, alright, yeah, so, hope you enjoyed what you watched, hope you liked what you saw. If you did, you know the deal, you know the spiel. This is Arcades, signing out. Have yourself a good day. Whee!